Hello, Clarissa Mosley here, psychologist, psychotherapist and director of Calm Mind Psychology. And in this video, I'm going to be explaining why a narcissist cannot change. So if you have a narcissist in your life and you're existing in the vain hope that one day they may change to be the person that you want them to be, please watch this video and I'll explain to you why that is never going to happen. So first we need to define what we mean by a narcissist, because there are people with narcissistic traits or characteristics that do not have the personality disorder. Narcissistic personality disorder is an enduring system of characteristics and traits that does interfere with a person's functioning across the board. Personality disorder happens and when the personality is forming. It is part of who that person is. The person with narcissistic personality disorder has a level of inflexibility in their personality. They may present a different persona when they're getting a feed from other people, but that is simply a role they're sort of acting into, because they exist by virtue of the opinions of others. So if they're getting a supply in one area, then they're going to feel enlivened by that. But they lack the flexibility to be able to be aware, and that because they also lack insight of what their behaviour is doing to you at home. This is really important when we talk about change. How does change happen? Okay, I'm a therapist. Let me explain. So change happens when you become aware that there's something happening in your world that you seem to be the common denominator of, that you want to understand better. Now, we exist within our own ego. It's like you're in the forest, you can't see the trees, so you go to a therapist or you ask a friend or you get some feedback from outside. In answer to the question is, what is it that I'm doing that I can change about me to make my life run smoother and better? And a therapist might help you look through how the patterns got set up in your childhood or previous relationships or the trauma that may have happened, and you gain insight. You are driven by an emotion or by a drive to be better. You know, most people want to not cause any harm in their lives. They want to have a happy life. They want to know what it is that they are doing that they can fix. This is nothing that a narcissist would ever want. And I'll explain why in a minute. So when you go to a therapist or you go to a friend or you go looking for information, you're seeking to have insight into your own behaviour. And that insight, which can be delivered in the form of many small or big aha experiences, that's a light bulb moment. Oh, this is happening because I'm repeating a pattern in relationships where I do this when I get this, this happens and I do that, and it's like, right, okay, got it. Okay, now I'm motivated to change. I have an emotional charge with this information of this awareness, of this insight, where I'm like, oh gosh, now I see that. I don't want to keep doing that. Now, old habits die hard. It might be hard to change certain behavioral traits within you, but you have a desire to change. And so you set about the steps of going, right, what can I do to fix this? How can I remediate this? How can I modulate myself and my behavior in order to get different results down the track? That is the essence of change. A narcissist has an inflexible personality despite the many different masks that they put on for other people. They have a lack of emotion that drives them to want to change. And they have a lack of ability to have self-reflective insight. let's segue here for a minute and understand that narcissists are people, right? They are people. They are often incredibly intelligent people, and they may have an intellectual awareness of what they're doing. And you might say to them, hey, when you don't talk to me for 3 days, I really go cold. I suffer. And they may be able to look at that and go, I can see how that would happen. Yeah, okay. All right. And because maybe they don't want to lose the relationship, they might moderate their behaviour in the short term. They might go, okay, well then, all right, so if I talk to you sooner, will that change it? Will that be okay? And they might go, okay, I'll do that. They might make a short-term agreement that they might change their behaviour because intellectually they can see, but they are not driven by the insight of how they do this, why they do that, the emotional desire to change, because the minute your narcissist gets upset again, all bets are off. So post an argument, they may be very hoovering, they're apologetic, I'm so sorry, oh yeah, I did this because you did that, but if that doesn't happen again, we're good. You might offer your complaint and your suggestion for how they might change. They may tacitly agree, but the moment something happens that upsets them again, they don't have the capacity to change their responses in those moments. Because the insight, there's nothing to be insightful to. And there is no emotional urge at that time that is empathic enough, that sees your point of view enough at that time that would drive them to change. A defining feature of narcissistic personality disorder is a lack of empathy for others. Again, a narcissist can show up like they have empathy. They can look sympathetic. They can act compassionate. They can bring chocolates when you're in hospital. That's not empathy. That's bringing chocolates. That's giving flowers. It's not empathy. Empathy is when we can feel, we imagine we feel what another person's feeling. We can jump over into them in a way and go, oh, sorry, gosh, whoa, ouch. That must have really been upsetting. I almost feel it inside me too. Narcissists don't, because they don't have an ability to get outside themselves. Everything happens inside. And when they get upset, they effectively regress to about a 2-year-old. So this is a fundamental thing that I want to explain why a narcissist, someone with narcissistic personality disorder can't change, is because their fracturing, their disorder emerged as their personality developed. And I'm not talking at age 7 when they can think back to this decision they made. I'm talking infancy. I'm talking a toddler. I'm talking about the years before anybody has got any real memories. There is behaviours that is happening between the child and the caregiver and the caregiver parent that are shaping or not shaping the development of a healthy ego. So Alan Shaw has written volumes on the research into child development, infancy, into the mother, can be a grandmother, can be a caregiver, can be a father, relationship with the baby, and what capacities come online in the baby and how it's modulated and developmentally matured by an adult. We grow up in relationship. So how the caregiver is treating you over and over and over again. We're not talking about single incident, oh my God, I left the baby to cry for too long, they're broken. No, we are not talking about that. Please, mothers, get off your little guilt chair. It's okay. You do one thing wrong is not going to break your child, but you continue a behavior over and over again that you might be completely unaware of. This is possibly got nothing to do with love. It's possibly got nothing to do with the good intentions of the parent. It has to do with how the parent is going in that time, what skills they have, what is their personality set up like. If you've got a narcissistic parent, you've got a high chance of recreating another narcissistic personality disorder in the child. A highly abusive parent, a neglectful parent, a over-shaming parent, a parent with a mental illness, a parent with an addiction, a parent who is busy with illness, with caretaking another, who dominates all of their energy. There are so many different things and reasons why this disturbance in the personality formation can happen. And a very important point to mention is it doesn't always happen. So I can describe all of these conditions, and in maybe 30% of these babies, they will develop into narcissism, and 70% might develop normally. Or some might develop narcissistic personality, some might develop borderline personality, some might grow into being really great codependently oriented people. So it's really about the baby's temperament, the child's inborn capacity, whether or not the predisposition, this is a genetic thing, we do know that certain genes provide tendencies to express in certain ways. Many people will dispute this, but we're talking epigenetically. It doesn't mean to say if you've got the gene for low empathy that you're going to be a narcissist. I know for a fact this is not true. It also doesn't mean that if you've got the genes for high empathy that you're going to branch more into being codependent, although I do feel that this is a segue point where this could happen. And we're talking multiple genes. We can't just look at the oxytocin gene and go, well, they're probably going to experience this kind of upbringing and become more codependent. But the empathic function has got a lot to do with things. So when the baby is developing, it goes through phases where there needs to be a resolution of the major developmental sort of challenges that are inherent in those phases. For me to explain these would take up another whole video or 5. But if you're interested, look at Margaret Marler. This is Ellen Shaw. And he becomes very detailed about the things that can go wrong. So with narcissistic personality disorder, the fracture can occur approximately at 18 months. It's not like parents being overindulgent to a 10-year-old who's getting all the gifts and things, although that can create a sense of entitlement and a sort of a spoiled child. Rather, when the child is developing their personality really early, when they're wiring up about who they are in the world, and this happens from 0 or -0 onwards up until about 3, you really have a lot of the wiring and all of the framework laid down. When you've got a 1-year-old, up to 18 months beyond, what you've got is, if you watch a 1-year-old, they are thrilled with the world, they're thrilled with themselves, they're running around. It's called infantile grandiosity, and it's 100% appropriate. This is healthy narcissism. This is, I'm excited, I'm enthralled with the world, I'm me, I've got all these new skills, I can move around, I can pick up things, I can go over here, and the infant is like high on this infantile grandiosity. There's this early narcissism. So what happens as that child grows through that period is that the parent is meant to regulate. They're meant to, if the child gets way too excited, they're meant to calm the child back down. Not tell them to shut up and sit down and tell them off and break them, but like pull them back into line slowly. This happens over how many times a day, a week, a year? Like, this is an ongoing process. So the grandiosity needs to be slowly pulled into line. You can meet a child and they go, oh, look at you, aren't you amazing? Yeah. And then when the child starts going too crazy, it's a parent's job. Just like, no, okay, calm down, come on. Okay, let's go. Must be nap time soon. Let's sit down with a book. You can let them run around and go crazy, but it's not like out of control. A narcissistic parent will feed into this. Look at my little one. Look at you running around. Aren't you amazing? Yeah. And they'll amp them up even more. So the window of tolerance where there's optimal functioning can get peaked out. Now, what's happening in this first year is that the baby is switching from the right brain, which is all emotional, tone, gist, to the left brain, which is like, okay, here's more inhibition, there's language coming online, I can express myself in other ways. And so this infantile grandiosity needs to be regulated by the adult, and as it sort of starts to change, as the brain hemispheres start to switch around and the baby becomes more aware of them being a person, an 18-month-old looks in a mirror and goes, oh, papa, they become aware of themselves. What is also very present, because a baby is nothing but a giant nervous system, all emotions, is shame comes in. So when an infant goes into shame, it's the parent's job to regulate them out of it. Shh, it's okay, Papa, it's okay, come on, it's all right, don't cry, Mummy's here. So they soothe them and bring them back up into the window of tolerance when they're crumbled and crashed. A narcissistic parent is not good at doing that. A narcissistic parent can even shame the child more. What? Why are you crying? What's the matter with you? Right? So the baby doesn't get regulated, they get punished. We can take the extreme into abusive parents. What happens if the baby is getting hit for having a meltdown? What happens if they are in a really unsafe, violent situation? What happens if the parent doesn't have the skills to bring them down out of the excited state or regulate them up out of the drop into shame? What happens if it's more important how the parent feels? What happens if the child is manipulated in all of this? What happens if they are punished as a toddler and sent away to deal with it themselves, right? And the kid doesn't know how to regulate. A parent's job is to instill in their child healthy emotional regulation. If a parent doesn't know how to do it with themselves, it's going to be difficult for them to instill that in their child. And this is not blaming people particularly. There are 100 different situations I just mentioned where it can be difficult for a parent to do that. Sickness, alcoholism, addictions, mental health issues, etc. In the individual that has the predisposition, the vulnerability for narcissism, and we have seen it show up in brain scans, what can happen around this time is that they do not learn self-regulation. So the shame gets bottled inside. It's too painful to bear and they've got no idea of what to do with it. And the grandiosity becomes sort of like a second life. It becomes an idealized ego. We're talking down the track as the child develops their ego. It's kind of like, right, I'm going to escape into this fantasy of who I am and how great I am, but my core self remains undeveloped. And when I feel shamed, so I'll jettison forward into present day time. When you shame a narcissist, when you pull away from their need for supply, when you do something wrong, when you insult them and inflate their narcissistic injury, remember they don't have a solid core self of which to regulate this. It wasn't internalized way back then before they were 3 years old, before they even had the words to describe it. It sounds like painful for you to hear, but they are broken at the most fundamental level. And there is nothing to fix that, unfortunately. Depending on the extent, obviously everything's on a spectrum, but if that is a true function of their personality, there's nothing you can go back and fix that. There's no words at that time. There's no reparenting. There's nothing that can fix that. The core self did not develop. It became like a shell. The shame cannot be regulated. So what happens? It gets projected out. You become the source of their shame and pain. And because their ego is undeveloped and there is no empathy, they don't know how to reach over into your shoes and see that you might really love them or that you might really feel for them. It doesn't matter, right? They are a 2-year-old within themselves. And all that matters and all that they can do then is become as a 2-year-old would in an adult body. They've got the adult sense in some way, where they feel insulted, injured, hurt. Their fantasy of you is destroyed. Like a 2-year-old, you're not my friend anymore. And you become the one who is the source of the pain, right? No matter what you did, you sometimes often can't fix it. You become the source of it. You become the one that will be punished. The narcissist feels absolutely justified in their retaliation or their revenge upon you because you hurt them. And just like a 2-year-old, they're going to get you back. You took my toy, oof, you are going to cop it. And there is no core self in there of which to have insight on this behaviour. It's all this sort of fragile ego that's being shored up by opinions from others, like other people's supply, right? And if you break that supply function, you become devalued. You might see glimpses. Some narcissists move in and out of this kind of idealization and devaluation phase, but there's nothing to work with. This is why narcissists don't come into therapy very often. They might come in because a relationship's really broken, like once it's broken, not before when you're asking them, please, can you change your behavior, like once they've broken it. But they will nod and agree, but their capacity to change is not there. There is nothing to have insight into. There is no emotional drive and empathic function for them to utilize, right? It is simply this infantile development, this early breakage from which an adult persona has developed, and they might have developed skills and capacities and talents and excel in a certain area. But when it comes to intimate relationships, there isn't anything there to have that intimate relationship with, because intimacy, into me, I see, or you see, isn't there. There's nothing to see into. It's a sort of a shell. Like they just go about their lives. They're often not very happy. And we often feel sorry for them because we go, well, aren't they damaged or wounded or traumatized? And often they are. And it's really sad. But there's no fixing that. You can accommodate it, you can maneuver around it, you can placate it, but you really are just an object. You're an instrument in their life. You're not seen as a person, right? They don't see you as a valid other to show up for. You are either useful or you're not. You are either a source of pleasure for a little while or you're a source of pain. Like you're a thing. This is hard to say. I feel it's hard to say, but it's the brutal truth. And again, this is narcissistic personality disorder. There are varying degrees of people that have got narcissistic traits that have got the ability for self-insight. They can go, oh yeah, I was being a real asshole, or I was being a real bitch then. I'm sorry. Shit. I feel bad. I feel guilty. Right? So guilt is where we have another person that we can apologize to. Right? There's like a person that we're like, oh, I did you wrong. I'm so sorry. Shame is where you collapse inward and you're just like, oh, I'm bad. But when a narcissist feels bad, they want to make you feel worse. So they've got to offload all of that shame and pain onto you. Right? It's kind of like there's a wall. Right? There's this wall, there's hollowness, and it's like all operating on the outer layer. So I hope that has shed some light on the really basic reason why narcissists cannot change. That you understand at a better level now why your attempts at trying to reach in and find them often come up with nothing. Because sadly, and it's heartbreaking, right? There is a place for compassion. But if you are projecting all of your empathy onto them, you are basically enlivening them for longer, right? That's just another source of supply. It will give them leverage to manipulate you for longer. So I'll leave that information with you. Thank you for joining me through this, and I wish you the very best on your journey.